welcome to a place where the rain or fire sound never stops and the stories never rush you. You don't need to watch, just listen. Settle in. Close your eyes if you'd like. Before the story begins, where in the world are you listening from? And are you planning to sleep or stay awake with me? If this helps you rest, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. Story 1. What my reflection did when I slept. I don't look in mirrors anymore, not since that week in my grandmother's house. My name is Lee, and this is the story of why I sold every mirror I owned, covered every reflective surface, and now live in a home where even my phone screen is matte. It all started when my grandmother, a woman I'd always found distant and a little cold, passed away and left me her sprawling old Victorian on the edge of town. The lawyer said it was because I was the only one who ever visited without asking for money. I saw it as a fresh start, a blank canvas far from my noisy city apartment. The first thing I noticed, after the overwhelming smell of dust and lavender sachets, was the mirrors. They were everywhere. Ornate gilded ones in the hallways, a huge, tarnished one over the fireplace, a full-length cheval glass in the master bedroom, even small, beveled ones tucked into odd corners. It felt less like a home and more like a gallery dedicated to reflection. The first 2 nights were quiet, just the settling groans of an old house. The 3rd night, I woke up thirsty. The digital clock blazed 3:07 a.m. I padded to the kitchen, the cold hardwood biting my feet. As I passed the long hallway mirror, a shape flickered in the periphery of my vision. I stopped, heart thudding. It was just me, pale and tired in my oversized t-shirt, the darkness of the hall behind me like a void. I shrugged it off. Sleep does strange things. But then, as I turned to walk away, I swear my reflection lingered. Just for a fraction of a second, its head turned to watch me go after I had already moved. I told myself it was a trick of the light, my sleep-addled brain connecting dots that weren't there. The next day, I tried to brush it off. I was unpacking boxes in the study when I found one labeled estate documents in my grandmother's precise handwriting. Inside, under the deeds and insurance papers, was a small, leather-bound journal. It wasn't a diary of thoughts, but a log. Dates, times, and single chilling lines. March 12, 2:15 a.m. Movement in the parlor mirror. Not me. July 3, 11:30 p.m. Reflection smiled. I did not. The last entry, dated a week before she died, simply read. It learns. It waits. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Was this the rambling of an old woman losing her grip? Or a warning? So, tell me, have you ever had that feeling? The absolute certainty that you're being watched, even when you're completely alone. That primal itch between your shoulder blades. Comment below. I read everyone. That night, armed with the journal's terror, I decided on a test. Irrational, But I needed to prove to myself it was all in my head. I set up my laptop on the dresser in my bedroom, angled to record the full-length mirror as I slept. I hit record, double-checked the frame, and went to bed, feeling both foolish and deeply afraid. Sleep was a fractured thing, filled with dreams of silvered glass and silent, mimicking figures. I woke not to an alarm, but to a sound. A faint, rhythmic tap-tap-tap, like a fingernail on glass. It was coming from the corner of the room, from the cheval glass. I lay frozen, listening. The sound stopped. Slowly, I turned my head. The mirror showed my bed, my rumpled sheets, my own wide, terrified eyes staring back from the pillow. Everything was as it should be, except my reflection was already looking at me. I hadn't moved my head yet. I scrambled out of bed, yanking the quilt off and throwing it over the mirror, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The fabric draped over the ornate frame, but it sagged in the middle, as if pressed from the other side. I didn't wait to see more. I ran to the laptop, fumbling to stop the recording and play it back. The time stamp showed 3:18 a.m. The room was dark, illuminated only by the faint green glow of the clock. For 20 minutes, nothing. Then my sleeping form twitched. A moment later, the reflection in the mirror sat up. I was still asleep on the bed, but the Lee in the mirror sat up smoothly, turned its head, and looked directly at the sleeping me. It watched for a long time. Then it slowly turned its head and looked directly into the laptop's camera lens. A slow, knowing smile spreading across its face, a smile my sleeping face never made. It raised a hand and gave a slow, deliberate wave. That's when the audio picked up the faint tap-tap-tap. The video ended as the reflection began to climb out of the mirror's frame. I think I screamed. I don't remember. The next few hours were a blur of panic. I called a friend, babbling, but they thought it was a prank or a stress-induced nightmare. Desperate, I decided to leave. I would pack a bag, go to a hotel, and deal with the house in the daylight. That was my moment of false safety, the rational plan. As I hurried down the grand staircase, my suitcase bumping behind me, I caught my reflection in the huge hallway mirror. I refused to look at it, keeping my eyes on the front door. But then I heard my own voice, whispered from right beside my ear. Don't go. It wasn't in my head. It was in the air, a breathy, perfect mimic of my own cadence. I spun, but there was nothing there. In the mirror, however, my reflection stood still, suitcase at its feet, staring at me with an expression of profound sadness and hunger. That's when all the mirrors in the house began to fog, as if from a sudden, cold breath from within. Letters traced themselves on the glass surfaces, one after another, in perfect unison. STOY, I ran for the door, but the heavy deadbolt, which I had unlocked myself, was now shut tight. I clawed at it, but it wouldn't budge. Behind me, I heard the soft, shuffling footsteps of someone walking across the parlor floor. I turned. The fog on the large mirror over the fireplace was clearing. and it was no longer showing the reflection of the room behind me. It showed a long, dark corridor that didn't exist in the house, lined with doors. And standing at the end of that corridor, facing away from me, was a figure in my t-shirt. It began to turn slowly. I couldn't let it finish. I grabbed a heavy wrought iron candlestick from the hall table, and with a cry that was pure terror, hurled it at the mirror. The glass didn't just crack, it exploded inward with a sound like a shriek, showering the floor with 1,000 silver shards. Silence. Deep, ringing silence. The other mirrors were clear. The door unlocked with a simple click. I didn't look back. I fled into the dawn, got in my car, and drove until the tank was empty. I sold the house a month later, as is, to a developer. I told the agent there was structural damage. I moved into a new apartment and had every mirror, every piece of reflective glass removed. I thought I was safe. I thought breaking the conduit had broken the connection. But last night, I was washing a glass bowl in my new, mirrorless kitchen. The water was still. The stainless steel faucet a curved, polished surface. As I reached to turn off the tap, I saw a face looking back at me from the metal. It was me, but wrong, tired, older, and it was mouthing 2 words over and over. I turned the water off so fast I almost broke the handle. But I know what it said. It said, "I'm here." And now, I see it in every dark screen, in every window at night, in the back of a spoon. It never left the mirrors. It just learned to use smaller ones. Story 2. The night I learned about the whisper tape. I should have never listened to that tape. The thought claws at me in the quiet hours, the same way the static from that cursed cassette used to scratch at the edges of my sanity. My name is Dev. I am a freelance audio engineer, which is just a fancy way of saying I make podcasts sound less like they were recorded in a tin can. My life was a comfortable loop of spectral analysis, noise gates, and the gentle hum of my studio monitors. That all ended when I took a job to restore an old audio tape found in the walls of a remote airbnb my client had just purchased. He was a true crime podcaster looking for a haunting audio artifact to boost his ratings. He got more than he bargained for. So did I. The airbnb was a converted ranger station, a lonely A-frame cabin buried deep in the black pine woods of Oregon. My client, Carl, had sent me a box. Inside, nestled in brittle yellowed newspaper, was a simple Sony cassette tape, its label faded to a ghostly blankness. The note read, "Found sealed inside the bedroom wall during renovation. Player is in the cabin. See what you can salvage. Big bonus if it's creepy." The bonus was tempting, and the mystery was a professional itch I had to scratch. I packed my portable digitization rig and my best noise reduction software, and I drove out there for a weekend of focused work. The cabin itself had that stale, sun-bleached smell of a place rarely lived in, mixed with the sharp, clean scent of new paint that couldn't quite mask the underlying odor of damp wood and neglect. key was under a fake rock that was too light, and the first thing I noticed inside was that all the clocks were unplugged, their digital faces dark. Carl had said the power was finicky, but the silence felt deliberate. The second thing was the cassette player on the pine dining table, of vintage Panasonic boombox from the 80s, dust-free, as if it had been waiting. I set up my laptop and my USB audio interface, connecting the boombox's output to my digital world. I remember the heavy, satisfying clunk as I slid the tape into the deck. The first playthrough was just to assess the damage. I hit play. The tape hissed with the white noise of age, a sound like a distant river. Then, a voice. A young man, sounding exhausted, maybe a little scared. Log entry, I don't even know what day it is. The forest, it doesn't sound right at night. It's too quiet, then too loud. I keep hearing something underneath the wind, like a whisper. My professional interest was piqued. A ranger's personal log. This was gold for Carl's podcast. But then the audio shifted. Underneath the man's voice, so faint I almost dismissed it as tape bleed, was another layer. I cranked my headphones. It wasn't words. It was a rhythmic, wet, clicking sound, like a tongue probing the roof of a mouth with too many teeth. I shivered, wrote it off as a damaged tape head imprint from some old radio show. I got to work cleaning it up. Noise reduction, spectral repair, bringing that whispering undertone more into focus. With each pass, the primary voice of the ranger spec came clearer, more frantic. It's not an animal. It mimics. Last night it sounded like Sarah, crying from the tree line. Sarah is in Portland. His breath hitched. He's learning. And underneath, that secondary audio grew more distinct. It wasn't just clicking now. It was a susurration, a chaotic, multi-voiced whisper that seemed to coil around his words. It made the hair on my arms stand up, a primal reaction to a sound that felt fundamentally wrong. I had to take a break. Stepping onto the porch, the evening forest was deafeningly alive with crickets and rustling leaves. But for a second, I thought I heard the cadence of the whisper in the rustle. I shook it off. Too many hours in headphones. You know, when you're deep into editing, you develop a kind of auditory pareidolia, hearing voices in white noise, finding patterns in static. I was sure that's what this was. My brain was stitching together random noise into something threatening. But what about you guys? Have you ever heard something in the dead of night? A sound your rational mind couldn't quite explain away. That feeling is a seed, and in the right soil, it grows into something monstrous. Inside, as night fully embraced the cabin, I made a breakthrough or a catastrophic mistake. I isolated the whisper track. Using a harmonic filter, I stripped away everything but that unsettling layer. I played it back alone through my studio monitors. The cabin filled with it. It was a language of murmurs and clicks and soft, glottal stops. It felt invasive, oily. And then a sentence coalesced, clear as a bell in the sonic mud. We see the listener. My blood turned to ice. It was a fluke, a random arrangement of sounds my pattern-seeking brain interpreted as speech. I slammed my laptop shut. The sudden silence was worse. It was a thick, listening silence. That's when the power went out, not with a flicker, but with a final, decisive thump from the breaker box. I was plunged into utter blackness, the kind only found miles from any town. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. Its beam was a pathetic spear in the overwhelming dark, and from outside, close to the porch, I heard it. Not on tape, in real life. The same rhythmic, wet clicking from the isolated track. Panic, pure and electric, shot through me. I backed away from the window, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The clicking stopped. For 10 minutes, there was only the sound of my own ragged breathing. Maybe it was an animal, a weird frog, a bug. The logic sounded hollow, even to me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I crept to the breaker box in the utility closet. The switch had indeed been tripped. I flipped it back. The lights buzzed on, harsh and reassuring. The hum of my laptop charger was a symphony of normalcy. I laughed, a shaky, relieved sound. See, an old cabin, faulty wiring, an overactive imagination fueled by a creepy tape. I was an idiot. I decided to pack up first thing in the morning and tell Carl the tape was beyond repair. I made tea, trying to steady my nerves. The familiar ritual calmed me. The fear receded, leaving behind embarrassment. I was about to get ready for bed when I noticed my laptop was still on, sleeping. I tapped the trackpad. The screen lit up, displaying the spectral analysis of the whisper track. The waveform, which should have been a messy squiggle, had formed a distinct, repeating pattern. It looked like a series of sharp, jagged peaks, and at the top of the screen, the audio file's name, which I had saved as Whisper Isolate. WAV had changed. It now read, Dev is here, WAV. My breath caught in my throat. A system glitch. It had to be. I went to close the file. My cursor froze. Then, without my input, the audio began to play. Not through the speakers this time. Through my laptop's internal microphone. It was listening and playing back a warped, real-time version of my own sharp intake of breath, layered with that ancient, hungry whisper. The clicking started again, not from outside, but from the laptop's tiny speaker, synchronized with something scratching slowly, deliberately, down the length of the main cabin window. I stumbled back, knocking over my chair. The audio blared, the whisper now a chorus, saying my name, not in imitation, but in recognition. Dev, stay, be heard. The boom box on the table, unplugged since the power outage, suddenly lit up. The tape inside began to spin, driven by no power source I could see. The hiss filled the room, and from it emerged the terrified voice of the ranger. But it was different now, slow and distorted. You opened the door, and then my own voice, from moments ago when id laughed in relief, played back, twisted and guttural. The scratching at the window became a pounding. The whole pane shook. I grabbed my car keys and bolted for the front door, yanking it open. The cold night air hit me. My car was just 20 feet away. I took 2 steps before I stopped dead. The forest sounds were gone. No crickets, no wind, no owls. Just a profound, absorbing silence. And in that silence, from every direction, came the soft, syncopated rhythm of clicking. It was in the trees. It was in the soil. It was behind me, from inside the cabin, emanating from the tape player and my laptop in a horrific stereo. Something moved at the tree line. Not a shape, but a suggestion of deeper darkness, a viscosity to the shadows that seemed to pulse in time with the clicks. It didn't approach. It simply unfolded, stretching towards me not through space, but through the very medium of sound. The whispering became a physical pressure in my ears, in my skull. We have your voice. We have your fear. We are in the signal now. I understood then. The tape wasn't a recording. It was a recording device. It didn't capture sound. It captured attention. And by cleaning it up, by isolating its frequency, I hadn't restored it. I had amplified it. I had tuned my world to its station. I ran. I don't remember the drive, just the blinding terror and the constant, irrational check of my rearview mirror for something I knew wouldn't be seen. I smashed the tape player and the cassette in a gas station dumpster miles away. I formatted my laptop, scrubbed my hard drives. I told Carl the tape was blank. He was disappointed. I moved apartments, changed my number. For a few weeks, nothing happened. I started to believe id left it in those woods. That's the false safety, the cruelest trick your mind plays. I was editing a simple voiceover for a commercial last Tuesday. I was using a new, pristine pair of headphones. The talent finished her line, and that's a wrap. In the half-second of silence before I stopped the recording, I heard it, faint, buried in the null space. A familiar wet click. It was on the raw file. I checked the spectral view. There, in the ultrasonic range, was a faint, jagged peak pattern. The same one from the cabin. It's on every piece of audio I've touched since. It's on this recording I am making right now. It's in the silence after you pause this video. It doesn't need the tape anymore. I gave it a voice. I showed it how to listen. And now, it's learning from all of us. Thanks for listening to my story. If you felt a chill, or if you're now staring a little too hard at the silent corners of your room, then you understand. Please, do me a favor, hit that like button. Subscribe for more tales from the edge of explanation. And in the comments, tell me, have you checked your audio lately? Story 3. The House That Learned My Nightmares. I am writing this from a place where the walls remember your secrets better than you do. My name is Ava, and I needed a quiet place to write. My first novel was due in 3 months, and the constant sirens and neighborly noise of my downtown apartment were a creative death sentence. So, I did what any reasonable, slightly desperate writer would do. I booked a remote Airbnb for a month. The listing promised profound solitude and inspirational seclusion in a converted caretaker's cottage on the edge of a vast, privately owned forest. The photos showed cozy, rustic charm. Stone fireplace, overstuffed armchair, a desk perfectly positioned before a large window overlooking the pines. It was perfect. It was also, I realize now, a meticulously set trap. The drive up was beautiful. All golden autumn leaves giving way to the deep, permanent green of the conifers. The cottage itself was exactly as picture-read quaint, clean, smelling of pine sap and old wood smoke. But there were details, small things I brushed off as quirks. The lock on the front door was a heavy, old-fashioned deadbolt, but it had been installed backwards, the keyhole on the inside. All the mirrors in the house, save for a small one in the bathroom, were covered with thin, white sheets, like furniture in an abandoned home. And the desk by the window, my promised writing nook, faced not into the room, but directly at a large, dark oil painting of the forest at night, its frame bolted to the wall. I remember chuckling, thinking the owner had a dramatic sense of decor. I was a fool. The first 2 days were blissfully productive. Words flowed. The silence was absolute, broken only by the wind and the occasional call of a bird. The third night, the sounds began, not from outside, but from within the walls. A soft, rhythmic scratching, like something methodically dragging a single fingernail along the interior of the plaster. It would start behind the headboard of my bed, travel slowly along the wall towards the kitchen, and then stop. I told myself it was pipes, or tree branches, or mice. But mice don't scratch in a straight, patient line. I started sleeping with the bedside lamp on. Has a place ever just felt wrong to you, viewers? Not because of something you saw, but because of a feeling that settled into your bones. A quiet certainty that the environment itself was observing you. I'd love to hear in the comments what your gut has told you that your brain tried to rationalize away. The false safety came on day 5. The scratching had ceased. I'd managed to convince myself I'd been spooked by my own imagination. A writer's mind running wild in the quiet. As a reward, I decided to build a fire in the hearth. I knelt before the fireplace, arranging the kindling. As I reached for a log from the basket, my hand brushed against something cold and smooth hidden at the back. I pulled it out. It was a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were filled not with writing, but with drawings. Crude, childlike sketches in charcoal and what looked like faded brown ink. They were all of the interior of the cottage. The desk, the bed, the fireplace, and in every drawing there was a figure. A tall, impossibly thin, shadowy shape, always in the corner of the room, always watching the person drawn in the center person who was, in each sketch, engaged in an ordinary act, sleeping, reading, staring out the window. The person's face was always rendered in meticulous, terrified detail. My blood turned to ice. The last drawing was of someone kneeling before the fireplace, reaching into the log basket. The figure in the corner of that drawing was closer, its elongated head tilted, I dropped the journal as if it had burned me. That's when I noticed the smell for the first time, a sweet, coppery odor, like old blood and damp soil, emanating from the cold fireplace. Panic is a quiet, efficient thing. It strips away pretense and leaves only animal instinct. I didn't scream. I just knew with absolute clarity that I had to leave. Now, I threw my laptop and a few clothes into my bag, my hands trembling so badly I could barely zip it. I ran to the front door, fumbling for the key. I inserted it, turned. The deadbolt slid open with a heavy clunk. I pulled the handle. The door didn't budge. I pulled again, throwing my weight against it. It was sealed shut, as if the frame had warped solid. I tried the windows. Each one was painted shut, immovable. The back door was the same. My cottage had become a sealed box. My breath came in ragged gasps. That's when the whispering started. It wasn't a voice, not really. It was the sound of dry leaves skittering across stone, forming something almost like speech. It came from the walls, from the floorboards, everywhere and nowhere. It was learning to shape words from the sounds of the house. I heard my name in the crackle of the unlit fire. Ava. I backed into the center of the living room, my back to the cold fireplace. The lamp on the desk flickered and died. The only light came from the moon through the large window. My eyes were drawn against my will to the large painted forest on the wall opposite. The painting was different. The trees in it were moving, swaying in a silent wind. And standing between them, where before there had been only darkness, was the tall, thin figure from the sketches. It was turned, as if looking over its shoulder, out of the painting and into the room. At me. I whimpered, squeezing my eyes shut. This is not real. This is stress. This is isolation, hallucination. But when I opened them, the figure in the painting was gone. A wave of nauseating relief washed over me. A trick of the light, my terrified mind. I took a shuddering breath, and then I felt it. A presence, a profound, jellied cold radiating from the corner of the room to my left. I didn't want to look. My neck turned anyway. It stood in the corner where it had been in every drawing. It was made of shifting darkness, a silhouette that drank the moonlight. It was tall, its limbs too long, its head a distorted elongation. It had no face, just a smooth obsidian plane. But I could feel it studying me, learning the contours of my fear. The sweet, coppery smell was overpowering now. It took a step forward, not a walk, but a slow, gliding shift, as if it were a shadow detaching itself from the wall. I was frozen, a rabbit before a wolf. It stopped in the middle of the room. The whispering coalesced, forming a sentence that echoed not in my ears, but inside my skull. Show me. The voice was a chorus of 100 broken things, snapping twigs, settling foundations, muffled sobs. Show me the dark place. I didn't understand. What? I choked out. It glided closer, the temperature plunging. You fear, you dream. Show me the dark place inside. I am hungry for it. This thing, this presence in the house, didn't just feed on fear. It fed on specific, personal nightmares. The journal wasn't a record of its victims. It was a catalog of their most intimate terrors, given form and substance by this entity. The covered mirrors, the locked doors it was keeping its food source contained, focused. My mind, a writer's mind brimming with imagined horrors, was a banquet. No, I whispered. It was suddenly inches from me. The cold was agonizing. I saw my own reflection, wide-eyed and pale, in the blank, dark surface of its face. Show me, it hissed, the sound like rats in the attic. An image, one of my own dormant childhood nightmares, bubbled up uncontrollably in my mind. The feeling of being buried alive, the weight of the earth, the suffocating darkness of a cramped wooden box. The room changed. The wooden floorboards beneath my feet softened, turned to loose, cool soil. The walls seemed to recede into a dank, earthen blackness. The smell of wet dirt filled my nostrils. I couldn't breathe. I was trapped in my own worst fear, made manifest by the thing that was now feeding on the psychic energy of my terror. I felt a crushing weight on my chest. I was going to die here, in a nightmare of my own making, consumed by a ghost that learned from its guests. I don't know how I did it. Perhaps the writer in me, the creator of worlds, thought back. As the sensation of dirt filled my mouth, I did the only thing I could think of. I stopped fighting the fear. I embraced it. I focused not on the terror of being buried, but on the specific, vivid details. The grain of the pine coffin lid, the sound of the first shovelful of earth hitting the wood, the slick, cold feel of an earthworm against my cheek. I poured every ounce of my creative energy into it, not as a victim, but as an author. I gave it the nightmare, fully formed, in overwhelming, excruciating detail. I shoved the entire constructed horror at the entity. It recoiled. A shriek, the sound of breaking glass and splintering wood, tore through the cottage. The earthen vision shattered. The thing writhed, its form flickering. It was overloaded, poisoned by the sheer, concentrated intensity of the horror I had forced upon it. It shot across the room, not towards me, but towards the painting. It flowed into the canvas, becoming the figure among the trees once more. But now the figure was contorted, clutching its head. The painting stilled. The forest within it was silent and motionless once more. The lock on the front door clicked open. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my bag and ran out into the cold night, not looking back. I drove until the sun came up. I never contacted the host. I left a 1-star review that simply said, "The walls are not quiet. I'm back in my noisy apartment now. The sirens are a comfort. I am trying to write, but the words won't come. My own imagination feels like a contaminated well. And last night, as I was trying to sleep, I heard a faint, familiar sound. A soft, rhythmic scratching. Not in the walls. It was coming from inside the closed lid of my old, empty laptop. I haven't opened it. I don't think I ever will. Some houses don't just learn your nightmares, you see. you home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you're not alone. Please give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new tale from the shadows. What's the strangest thing a place has ever made you feel? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, sleep well. Story 4. The echo that followed me home. I brought something back from that cabin, and now it lives in the silence between my heartbeats. My name is Ava, and up until 6 months ago, I was the kind of person who found peace in quiet places. My job as a freelance graphic designer meant I could work from anywhere. So when my grandfather passed and left me the old family cabin up in the remote pine forests of northern Michigan, I saw it as a blessing, a month of solitude to grieve, to sort through his things, and to finally finish my portfolio. The cabin was a relic, a 2-room structure of dark, aged logs, smelling of pine sap and decades of wood smoke. It sat at the end of a winding, unpaved road that seemed to swallow the sunlight. The only oddities I noted at first were the mirrors every single reflective surface, from the bathroom mirror to the small, tarnished one by the front door, was covered with a faded floral print cloth. And the silence. It wasn't peaceful, it was dense, like a held breath. The third thing was a single sentence carved with careful, almost reverent precision into the mantelpiece above the stone fireplace. It only speaks in echoes. I settled in, uncovering the mirrors, because honestly, who wants to live like that? My reflection looked tired, but normal. The first few days were blissfully productive. Then the sounds began. Not loud, intrusive noises, but subtle ones. It'd be sketching at the oak table and hear the distinct creak of the porch swing behind me. It'd turn, and it would be still. The chains rusted solid. It'd hear the soft scuff of a slipper on the floorboards in the hall, a sound I remembered from childhood visits me grandfather's shuffling gait. The air would grow cold in one spot, right by the rocking chair he loved. I chalked it up to grief, to an overactive imagination fueled by isolation and the power of suggestion from that strange carving. Okay, let me pause here for a second. For those of you watching, have you ever been alone in a house and heard a noise that just didn't fit? The kind that freezes you mid-step, your brain scrambling to label it the house, settling even though a deeper, primal part of you knows it's something else. What's the weirdest, most unexplained sound you've ever heard in your own home? Let me know in the comments. The escalation was methodical, a slow tightening of a screw. The echoes started. I'd drop my pencil, and a second later, from the empty bedroom, I'd hear the faint tap of it hitting the floor again. I'd sigh in frustration, and a breathy imitation of that sigh would whisper back from the kitchen. It was always a precise auditory mirror, but slightly off, softer, colder, lagging by a heartbeat. I started talking to myself, just to break the silence. And one afternoon, as I muttered, "I need more coffee," a voice that was almost mine, but flatter, devoid of emotion, repeated "coffee" from directly behind my chair. I spun around so fast I nearly fell. There was nothing but the covered window, the cloth swaying as if from a disturbance in the air. Fear curdled into full-blown terror. I stopped speaking aloud. I moved through the cabin like a ghost myself, on tiptoe, but the silence only made it worse. In the quiet, I could hear the thing learning. It began to echo sounds I hadn't just made. It'd hear the phantom crackle of the fireplace I hadn't lit, the echo of my own scream from the day before, the sound of my own weeping, played back to me in the dead of night. It was studying me, replaying my emotional reactions like broken records. The final straw was the lullaby. My mother used to sing a specific, obscure lullaby to me, sitting by the cold hearth, humming it to myself for comfort. I suddenly heard it sung back in a chilling, multi-voice chorus me mother's young voice, my own childhood voice, and that flat, hollow copy of my present voice all woven together, emanating from the covered mirror on the wall. I screamed, and the chorus of voices screamed back in perfect, horrific unison. I fled. I threw my things in the car at 3 a.m., not bothering to cover the mirrors, and drove for 16 hours straight, back to my safe, modern, one-bedroom apartment in the city. The relief was a physical wave, a loosening of a vice around my lungs. The sounds of traffic, of my neighbors, of life, felt like a protective blanket. For a week, I slept with the TV on, convinced id left the horror in those deep woods. Id done it. I was safe. The first echo in the apartment was the click of my front door locking. I heard it twice. I told myself it was the neighbor. Then it was the drip of my kitchen faucet, echoed from the living room. The hiss of my shower, repeated from the hallway. It had followed me. It was in the wires, the pipes, the very structure of the building. It had hitched a ride not in my luggage, but in my sonic footprint, in the recorded memory of the sounds it made. It was learning the new environment, mapping the acoustics of my home. My sanctuary became a recording studio for a phantom. The climax happened last night. A power outage plunged my building into a profound, city-swallowing silence. No hum of the fridge, no distant traffic, nothing. In that pure silence, I sat on my couch, paralyzed. Then, I heard my own voice, clear as day, from the dark hallway. It was a conversation it had on the phone with a friend a few days prior, complaining about work. "I am just so tired of it all," my echoed voice said. Then a pause, and the flat, hollow voice of the thing responding with my friend's lines, but in that same dead tone. It was replaying entire conversations, but now it was taking both parts. It was learning to interact. I couldn't take it. I whispered, "What are you?" From the darkness, right beside my ear, a chill breath on my neck, it echoed my whisper. "What are you?" I shouted, "Leave me alone." It shouted back, "Leave me alone." But the echo was layered, a cacophony of every time it ever said those words in fear, in anger, in that cabin. I broke. I did the unthinkable. I spoke to it directly, pleading, "Please, stop." There was a long, terrible silence. Then, using my own voice, infused with a grotesque mimicry of my own desperate sadness, it said, "I am lonely." That was worse than any threat. Its loneliness was a yawning chasm, an ancient, hollow need that had attached itself to the sound of my life. I had no answer. I just sat there, weeping silently, until the power finally flickered back on. The noises have stopped, for now. The apartment is quiet, but it's the same dense, listening quiet of the cabin. I can feel it here, sated for the moment, curled up in the digital hum of my electronics, in the echo chamber of my hard drive, in the memory of my own voice. It doesn't need to mimic me anymore. It has learned how to be me. I spend my days in utter silence, communicating through text, terrified of making a sound that will give it new material. But the body betrays you. Your heart beats, your blood flows, your stomach growls. And last night, as I lay awake, I heard it. A soft, rhythmic thumping from the wall behind my bed. Not an echo, a perfect, synchronized copy of my own heartbeat. It has found its favorite sound, and now it plays it back to me in the dark. A constant reminder that I am never, ever alone. The worst part is, I am starting to find the rhythm comforting. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you felt that chill, that sense of something lurking just outside your perception, then you understand. Please, if you enjoyed this journey into the echo, show your support by giving this video a like. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into the unexplained. And remember, in the comments below, tell me, what's the weirdest, most unexplained sound you've ever heard in your own home? Stay curious, but maybe keep the volume down. Story 5. Why I never trusted my own reflection again. I think the mirror in my grandmother's house was hungry, and I was the one who finally fed it. My name is Lee, and until last month, the most terrifying thing in my life was a quarterly tax bill. I was a graphic designer, used to controlling pixels on a screen, a world of perfect, logical order. So when my eccentric, reclusive grandmother passed away and left me her entire estatia crumbling Victorian on a forgotten, tree-choked street in a town it never visited, felt less like an inheritance and more like a bizarre administrative task, a nuisance. I planned to go in, sort through a lifetime of dusty knickknacks, sign some papers with a realtor, and be back in my minimalist apartment within a week. I was wrong. The house, known locally as the Ainsley Place, greeted me with a sigh of damp air and the scent of old roses and something sharper, like ozone after a storm. The key, a heavy iron skeleton, turned with a reluctant screech. Normalcy, I told myself. just an old house, but the silence inside was different. It wasn't empty, it was listening. The first unsettling detail was the mirrors. They were everywhere, not just in bathrooms and bedrooms, but in hallways, angled on landings, even a small, ornate one hung opposite the front door. All of them were old, their silvering clouded and speckled with black spots like age-related cataracts. The second detail was the pervasive chill. No matter how high I cranked the ancient radiator, a cold spot followed me from room to room, a personal winter. The third was the faint, rhythmic tapping. At first, I blamed the old pipes, but the rhythm was oft not the random clank of expanding metal, but a deliberate, patient tap, 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 like a fingernail on glass, that seemed to originate from no particular direction. I set up camp in the living room, avoiding the oppressive master bedroom with its heavy, carved four-poster bed and its wall-sized vanity mirror. My first night was a symphony of creaks and settling groans. Id just drifted into a fitful sleep when a sound jolted me awake. Not a tap, a scrape, a long, slow drag, like something heavy being pulled across the floor above me. The attic. My heart hammered against my ribs. I lay there, paralyzed, until dawn's gray light bled through the dusty curtains. In the morning, rational Lee took over. It was an old house. It had squirrels or raccoons. I needed to check the attic, if only to stop my imagination from conjuring worse. The pull-down ladder groaned in protest. The attic was a landscape of shrouded furniture and trunks, lit by a single grimy dormer window. And there, in the center of the bare floorboards, clear of dust, was the source of the scraping. An old, full-length cheval mirror, its wooden frame dark with age, stood facing the wall. Not leaning, standing upright, as if someone had just placed it there. Why would a mirror face the wall? A prickle of instinct told me not to turn it around. But curiosity, that ancient killer of cats and graphic designers, won out. I gripped the cold wooden sides and slowly pivoted it. The glass was clearer than any other mirror in the house. My reflection stared back, pale and wide-eyed in the dim light. But something was off. The angle of my head seemed wrong. My reflection's eyes tracked me a fraction of a second after my own movements. A trick of the light, I reasoned. Of course it's tracking you, Yurei looking at it. I leaned closer, peering at the subtle imperfections in the glass. And my reflection smiled. A small, cold curl of the lips that I absolutely was not making. I stumbled back, my breath catching. The reflection's face smoothed back to a neutral, mimicking my own shock perfectly. Okay, Lee, I whispered to the silent, listening house. Yurei tired, Yurei stressed, Yurei seeing things. I shoved the mirror back to face the wall, its legs screeching on the floorboards, exact sound from the night before. I fled the attic, sealing the ladder behind me with trembling hands. The days blurred into a cycle of daylight rationalization and nocturnal terror. The tapping grew more frequent. Id catch movements in the peripheral mirrors of fleeting shadow where none should be, a shape darting from one reflective surface to another, like a fish between pools. I started covering the mirrors with sheets, but in the morning, the sheets would be neatly folded on the floor beside them. I'd find my personal items, a hairbrush, a pen moved to different rooms, placed deliberately in front of a glass surface. One night, I woke up thirsty. I shuffled into the dark kitchen for water, and as I passed the old toaster, its blank, dark chrome face showed not my tired form, but a clear, sharp reflection of me still lying in my sleeping bag in the living room, sound asleep. Have you ever had a moment where reality just cracks, where something you see dismantles your entire understanding of what's possible? That was my moment. I froze, the cold from the linoleum seeping into my bare feet. I slowly turned my head to look back into the living room. There I was, a mound under the blanket, breathing steadily. I looked back at the toaster. The reflection was gone, replaced by the distorted warble of the dark kitchen. A scream built in my throat, but no sound came out. I was too terrified to make noise, as if sound would confirm my existence to whatever was playing with me. False safety arrived cruelly the next afternoon. The sun was out. A friendly local historian stopped by, having heard about my grandmother's passing. Over tea, she mentioned, almost casually, that my grandmother was the last in a long line of caretakers for the house. She was a private woman, the historian said. People said she knew how to keep things in their place. There were always stories about the mirrors, that they weren't for looking out, but for keeping things in. She left me with a pamphlet about local architecture, but her words echoed, a caretaker, keeping things in. That night, armed with a desperate, newfound logic, I did the unthinkable. I went back to the attic. The cheval mirror was turned around again, facing the room. My reflection waited. This time, I didn't look away. I approached it, my own face a mask of grim determination. "What do you want?" I whispered. My reflection's lips moved a second after mine, but the words that formed on its face were not the ones I spoke. They were silent, but I read them clearly on its mouth. Out. Then it lifted its hand and placed its palm flat against the inside of the glass. The surface didn't ripple like water, but it gave, like a film of glycerin. I watched, hypnotized, as the fingers began to press through, the tips emerging into my world, pale and waxy. A smell hit me, old perfume and damp earth. The tapping had been this constant, patient pressure from the other side. I stumbled back, but it was too late. The figure didn't burst forth, it poured. It unfolded from the mirror like a shadow detaching from a wall, a negative image of myself gaining substance and depth. It stood before me, wearing my face, but its eyes were flat, dark pools reflecting nothing. It tilted its head, studying me with a cold, academic curiosity. I tried to run, but my legs were lead. It reached for me, and its touch was the chill that had followed me through the house. concentrated and absolute. It wasn't trying to hurt me. It was trying to understand me, to map me. And in that understanding, I felt myself becoming less substantial, like a sketch being erased. The climax was not a fight. It was a terrible, silent trade. As the thing, the reflection, the imprint, the hungry echopold at the very essence of what made me leave. I did the only thing my screaming instincts demanded. I pushed back, not with my hands, but with my will, my memories, the chaotic, emotional, vibrant mess of my life that this thing lacked. I thought of my first heartbreak, the taste of my favorite coffee, the crushing boredom of Monday meetings, the sheer, stupid joy of finding a forgotten $10 bill in a jacket pocket. I flooded it with the unbearable weight of being real. It recoiled, its borrowed face contorted in something like pain or confusion. The flat eyes widened. It was a creature of perfect, cold imitation, and the chaotic fire of a real human experience was a poison. With a sound like shattering ice, it fragmented, pulling back into the mirror. The glass clouded over instantly, the silvering rotting away to a blank, opaque gray in seconds. I collapsed, gasping, the attic floorboards solid and real beneath me. I sold the house. I sold everything in it to an anonymous online buyer, listing it only as vintage mirrors, sold as is. I took the money and ran all the way back to my safe, modern, mirrorless apartment. I had every reflective surface removed or covered. My microwave has a blank panel. My phone screen is always dark. I use a polished bronze plate to check my hair, its distortion a comforting barrier. I thought I won. I thought I scared it back into its glass prison. But sometimes, in the absolute dead of night, when the city outside is silent, I feel that familiar, personal winter chill seep into the room. And from the dark, blank screen of my turned-off television, I hear it. A faint, patient, familiar sound. Tap, tap, tap. It's learning. And my apartment has so many screens. Thanks for listening to my story. If you felt that chill down your spine, you are not alone. The world is full of quiet, unexplained horrors. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more tales from the shadows. And in the comments below, I have to ask, what's the strangest, most unexplainable thing you've ever seen in a reflection? Share your stories, but maybe do it in the daylight. Thank you for listening. Please leave a comment, like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share this with your friends. Good night and rest well.